Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 5th International Plagiarism Conference. My name is Will Murray, and we're basically celebrating 10 years of authentic assessment at this conference, so we run the conference every other year. And what we're going to attempt to do now is to cover 10 years in 10 minutes. So that should be a bit of a challenge, and because of that, there may be some self-plagiarism during this talk. So the Plagiarism Advisory Service in the UK, which was a national service, was formed in 2002 because of concerns around surveys which have been done in the US, proliferation of websites, cheat sites, and also with cloud power, providing students with unlimited access to information, and the tutors themselves may not have been able to identify where some of that data had come from. So when the service was created, there were two main components to it. There was an advisory service and there was technology. And the technology that was selected was Turnitin. Now, at that time, Turnitin itself had originally been created to do formative peer review. So that's where it came from. Dr. John Barry invented it. He was trying to harness the power of the web to allow students to have more formative feedback from each other initially. And of course, that was something that he couldn't do in the classroom because of the size of his classes. But he couldn't make that work because the students were copying from each other. And that's why he introduced or created this technology, Turnitin, to identify similarity between those students. And he called this a plagiarism detection service, and we inherited that term when we set up the Plagiarism Advisory Service. And there were really only two problems with that. One, we didn't know what plagiarism was, and two, we're pretty sure we couldn't detect it. But apart from those two things, it was great. But it was a significant catalyst, and I think what we've discovered is that it's actually an essential piece of technology if it's used in the right way. And it really was a catalyst for assessment change in general. And what I'm going to try and cover now are some of the things that the institutions in the UK over the last 10 years have done to help address plagiarism and also to improve the authenticity of assessment. And I'm going to start by looking at what we're actually trying to achieve when we use something like Turnitin and to put that technology in context. So if we think about the ideal essay, and I've thought about 3 dimensions to this. So we want students to use their own words, we want it to be their own creation, and we want them to give credit. So this is about finding their own voice and being able to articulate arguments of their own. But it's not quite that simple, because if it was, it would be very straightforward. But in fact, there's a range of possibilities in each of those dimensions. There may be some credit given, there may be no credit given. Some of the wording may be entirely theirs, some of it may not be theirs. Some of it may be their own creation, some might have been created by somebody else. And that makes it quite difficult to say whether something is plagiarized or not. So it's not a straightforward thing. I think what we can agree on, though, is if a student goes to an essay bank and simply downloads an essay and hands it in, that's not good. That's certainly bad. It's also pretty bad if they ask a friend to write it for them, so they get a ghostwriter to write the work for them. Now, in my view, those things aren't really plagiarism, because in both cases, there may be correct attribution within those works, but it certainly is cheating. And I think that's probably a more simplistic way of looking at that. So essay sites and ghostwriting sites, straightforward cheating. Also, I think if the work already exists, if it's an existing piece of work, in most academic contexts, that would also be considered cheating, because generally we don't allow students to submit for one assignment a piece of work they created for another one. Of course, that's down to the individual assignments and the academics involved, but in general, that might also be considered cheating because we want them to do their own work. So what is plagiarism? Well, plagiarism is this top quadrant, really, and I guess the worst form of plagiarism is where somebody takes some ideas from someone else, they reformulate them into their own words, and they don't give credit. Not something that we can identify through Turnitin, but that's probably one of the worst forms of academic plagiarism. And then there are degrees of that, which is what I've shown with these shaded boxes. So this is where Turnitin can help. Turnitin helps where the wording already exists. And that's the only place that Turnitin can work, because it matches similarity. It doesn't identify plagiarism. And I think this is one of the things that institutions learn when they first start to put this technology in place. And it's a mistake to think that there's a perfect score from Turnitin in terms of the originality score. So what it does do, though, is identify possible plagiarism. It also identifies cheating if you're thinking about things like essay sites or collusion and things like that. But all of it comes down to academic judgment. I think that's absolutely crucial in the use of Turnitin. At the end of the day, it's the academics that decide whether plagiarism has occurred, not Turnitin. Turnitin's just a tool. So that puts the technology in context. What else have our institutions been doing? Well, one of the things that they've been doing is reducing the opportunities for plagiarism by tackling assessment design. And we've got a lot of information on this. There's been papers over the past 5 years at this conference about how to go about assessment redesign, some at this conference. And we've got a lot of material on plagiarismadvice.org about how to go about that. The other thing we can do is provide richer feedback to students. And this is all about making the assignment process matter, make the assessment matter. If the students don't believe the assessment matters and they don't gain anything from it, then they're much less likely to engage in it. So it's very important that there's very rich feedback. Tools like Turnitin now have moved into this area so that they actually provide mechanisms for giving rich feedback to help address this problem. Make use of originality checking technology. There really isn't any other way to check work, to verify that it's original, other than using some form of technology, because there's so much out there. Turnitin at the moment has 24.5 billion pages of web content in it, 122 million articles. It's absolutely colossal. It's the biggest database in existence for checking originality. So it's quite important to use that both summatively and formatively. Have consistent penalties, policies and procedures. We ran some work in the UK, a project called Amber, where we looked at all of the penalties and procedures that institutions were using to address issues of plagiarism. That project's ongoing. There's a paper about that at this conference. And we were attempting to create a standard tariff for consistency and fairness. And then staff professional development, because, as I mentioned, you need to know how to use these tools if you're going to deploy them. And they do need to be deployed, I think, as part of a holistic solution where you're trying to reduce the opportunities and you're making use of technology as well. And you need to make use of technology in the right way. I mean, if you have students complaining about, for example, Turnitin identified some references and said they were plagiarism. Turnitin doesn't say anything's plagiarism. All it does is match similarity. So it's about making sure that the staff that use the technology really understand it before they deploy it. Set standards. Make sure students know what you expect of them in terms of referencing, something else that a lot of our institutions are engaged in. We did some work with Ofqual to roll out some information about this to schools in the UK before going to university. Making use of, teaching the skills, making use of formative support, so make sure the students understand or have information literacy skills, understand how to go about conducting research, recording their research, and then referencing it correctly, all very important. And then also creating a culture of honesty, so the academics themselves should also reflect the standards that the institution wants by referencing things themselves in their work that they present to students. So all these things contribute to authentic assessment, and these are all ideas which have been developed through this conference and through our institutions here in the UK and institutions from elsewhere in the world that have attended this conference. And I've bracketed these into three groups: ethics, engineering and enforcement. I think most of the things we do fall into one of those categories. Okay, so quickly then, where's the technology gone? Well, it started off being called plagiarism detection technology, as you probably gathered, a term I don't really like. But it does identify similarity in a way that can't be done elsewhere. But now we have much richer feedback available in tools like Turnitin as well. You can build libraries of feedback and you can drag and drop these onto student assignments. Students absolutely love this technology. They really like to get their feedback online. We get lots of positive feedback about it. Also, we have a capability within Turnitin to have more consistent marking rubrics, so you can define standard rubrics, you can share them. And we've recently added voice comments, because once you have this ability to add very rich feedback to student work, you want to make sure that students engage in it. Otherwise, it just becomes another book for them to read. So providing them with voice comments is another way to engage them in that feedback process. And again, this has been pretty widely accepted. The other thing we've done, because once you get to this point where you're asking the staff to do marking online, a lot of staff don't actually like sitting in front of a PC to do marking. They'd rather mark offline, or they'd mark in a more want to mark in a more natural location. So coming out in the new year, there's a piece of technology on the iPad which will enable you to use all the features of Turnitin within a more convenient mobile application. And then finally, we are continuing to advance the originality checking software. We added translating matching to it this year, so it'll actually do translations and then match them against the English language database. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly summarize, because I see I'm running over. I almost did it in 10 minutes, not quite. If you're in search of authentic assessment, what three things can you do? First of all, use holistic solutions that take technology and academic best practice together, rather than thinking one or the other will solve it on its own. Conferences like this, where you can share good practice. And finally, we need people like you to bring the ideas to us, and then we'll help disseminate them through events like this. So thanks for coming. I hope you will really enjoy the conference. I'm going to hand over now to Craig Mahoney from the Higher Education Academy, who's going to talk a little bit about the Academic Integrity Service.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, I'm going to mention that. My script is perhaps covering a number of things, and I thought I'd first start by welcoming you here to the Sage Gateshead and provide a short opening address to this 5th International Plagiarism Conference. As a resident of Newcastle, which I am, and a former Deputy Vice-Chancellor at Northumbria University, I maintain a very special relationship with Newcastle Gateshead, renowned as the greatest student city in the UK with over 48,000 students from around the world. Historically, Tyneside, where you are at the moment, was one of the most prolific coal mining regions in the UK, and until the Thatcher years, Tyneside shipyards had been one of the largest centres of shipbuilding in the world for more than a century, and was responsible for building the entire Japanese Navy up until 1914. They used it against us later. Gateshead is famous for many things, including the largest indoor shopping complex in Europe, the Gateshead Millennium Bridge just over here, the Tyne Bridge just over here, which inspired the Sydney Harbour Bridge, the Baltic Centre for Contemporary Art just down the way, the Angel of the North behind me, and of course the Sage where we are here today. One of the most important performing arts buildings in northern England, with its high-tech materials and modern iconic appearance. It's a testament to the successful reincarnation of the waterfront here in Gateshead and the vision of Gateshead Council, which has been quite outstanding. And here we can recognise close links with education. Within the UK higher education system, there are more than 2.5 million students studying annually. And as educators, we must ensure modern learning enables students to achieve their full potential whilst minimising their risk of falling foul of a moral code of academic integrity, which could destroy the life-changing road on which they had commenced a journey. On behalf of the Higher Education Academy, I'm delighted we've been able to sponsor this 5th International Plagiarism Conference. The Higher Education Academy is a national body for enhancing learning and teaching in higher education, and we work with universities and colleges, funders and professional bodies, sector agencies and governments to bring about change which we hope has an impact on the student learning experience. Assessment and feedback is a key theme embodied across the HEA's work, and the development of academic integrity is a crucial aspect within this. Our work on assessment and feedback is designed to support the UK higher education system, where we take responsibility for developing new knowledge, advise on policy and strategy, create resources, and share effective practice. In supporting institutions and their students, we aim to help them improve their approaches, including emphasising the importance of assessment for learning. In 2011-12, we've held numerous workshops and seminars to share institutions' learning. A forthcoming publication, A Marked Improvement, prepared to help transform assessment, will be available in the autumn. Dr. Tracy Brettag, speaking after me today, will be telling you about the policy, practice and the student knowledge from Australia on this subject. But as we start today, I'd like to reflect on the work of the HEA. The Higher Education Academy is committed to building knowledge and increasing evidence for what works in learning and teaching. This event is an example of sharing best practice in the area of academic integrity. The HEA's Academic Integrity Service was established to raise awareness and enhance understanding. The service promotes an holistic approach to unacceptable academic practice, taking account of the pedagogic and management responses needed to address issues such as plagiarism and collusion. In an increasingly modernised higher education environment, plagiarism is an ever-present risk. With students under pressure to deliver a first or 2-1 degree, with more graduates chasing fewer jobs in the UK and some students taking a workplace learning approach to learn while they earn, pressures, opportunities, temptations or even ignorance may change behaviours. At a recent address in Washington DC, Bill Gates, Microsoft founder, urged college leaders to grasp the nettle and embrace new technologies and new pedagogies to support young learners in their preparation for life and work. He argues for radical reform to college teaching, advocating a move towards a flipped classroom, where students prepare for classes by watching videos, viewing PowerPoint presentations, reading books and articles in preparation for a student-led learning environment where staff facilitate more than deliver content. And of course, I'm an example today of a didactic experience that I don't like. In such a world, flipping could involve thousands of students, making the learning space huge, with the possibility for academic integrity being compromised. Our goal and yours is surely to better understand the student learning journey and to work together to improve outcomes for students. Part of the solution lies in engaging students effectively and listening to the student voice, understanding their skills, their abilities, their pressures, and helping them appreciate the concepts embodied in academic integrity. But student engagement in awareness programs should commence, as Will said, before they enter university education. Helping students to understand the educational landscape prior to joining a university is an important part of the change agenda required to adequately tackle academic integrity issues. The HEA has hosted a number of successful events, bringing together sixth form students and their teachers together with university staff. These are designed to enhance the knowledge and understanding of all involved, leading to a smoother transition. Such events provide an early engagement with opportunities where academic integrity, including plagiarism, can be introduced as part of a discussion on methods of study, writing and assessment that students will experience in a higher education setting. While the main focus of the Academic Integrity Service has been to develop strategies and awareness of plagiarism in higher education, increasingly it's seen as an issue that must also be addressed in further and secondary education. As part of students, as soon as students are expected to produce their own work, discussions relating to cheating, collusion, plagiarism and academic standards should form part of the curriculum experience. Plagiarismadvice.org was commissioned by Ofqual, as we heard a moment ago, to develop resources for the 14 to 19 sector and to encourage awareness and develop good practice at an early stage. It's important that educators take a positive, proactive approach, providing tools to assist in the understanding of where the lines are drawn. For example, the University of Aberdeen consolidated its efforts on how to present written work in an acceptable format, reducing the risk of those committing unintentional plagiarism. This approach included induction workshops for students and encouraged the thorough explanation of what was meant by plagiarism. Techniques for avoiding plagiarism and referencing formats were covered and received positive feedback from the students involved. And as a result of the workshop, there's been a significant reduction in students who argue that they don't understand the concept. Effective use of software to evaluate the originality of student work can be embedded within institutional policies, and we just heard Will again talk of that, as part of an holistic approach to academic integrity. However, these detection systems are not a panacea. Jonathan Bailey, founding editor of Plagiarism Today website, interviewed by the Times-Hire in January, is quoted as saying, "These systems work," he was misquoted by the way, "these systems work best when they aren't used as mysterious plagiarism cop designed to play gotcha with plagiarists." That's where the Times-Hire stopped. He goes on to say, "Instead, they need to be incorporated into plagiarism education and used as a tool to teach what plagiarism is, how to cite sources, when to cite, etc. This is why many schools are actually incorporating plagiarism detection into the writing process, having students submit their work to the system so they can get results before grading. There are other, often more effective ways of detecting the hardcore cheaters, but incorporated into a much larger process for teaching and dealing with plagiarism, these systems can be worth their weight in gold. It's just a matter of how they are used." That's the full context of his quote. If you go back to the Times-Hire, you see they only gave the first sentence, which he wasn't happy about. The HEA works closely with the National Union of Students to better understand how the engagement of students can be most productive in the student learning experience. This takes a number of forms, but it's aimed at ensuring students are heard and are able to share their own learning experience. There is, in my opinion, a divergence of understanding and confusion amongst students in higher education, which needs dialogue and discussion, together with collaborative developments on academic integrity. This confusion can centre on subtleties between paraphrasing and plagiarism, and the difficulties they experience in writing essays, where they need to show that they've reviewed literature, provided evidence, created a dialogue, and contributed their own perspectives. The problem can be compounded when language and culture are added to the mix, with students from other countries sometimes less familiar with what are acceptable practices. Preventative measures, including assessments that design out likely plagiarism, are urgently needed. This again is where software can be designed to help. For example, JISC developed online support for students to expand their internet research skills, copyright and user responsibilities, whilst the HEA has helped produce an online companion for undergraduate dissertations in social sciences. Within the virtual learning environment at the University of Northampton, a course for independent study was developed to help students understand the importance of assessment, the concepts of integrity, and the skills to avoid misconduct so as to become familiar with the policy. We're currently working with the NUS, developing a resource for those working in student unions as part of a central group supporting learners. It's hoped this will enhance the understanding of academic integrity and provide additional resources in line with our priority to improve the student learning experience. However, much has been researched and written in this area. The knowledge of what works, some of this presented in our Policy Works document from the HEA and more from our Teaching International students, has confirmed that specific actions can help alleviate the problems associated with academic integrity. but the responsibility is two-directional. This is not merely a student issue. Institutions need to make their expectations explicit with clear policies in place. Helping students with exemplars, model answers, and clear feedback on assessment is crucial. Setting creative assessment tasks with real-life relevance rather than merely recovering information minimises risk of misconduct, and clear policies on penalties communicated to all staff and students must be in place. You can find some excellent recommendations to reduce the number of cases where academic integrity is being investigated in our publications Policy Works or Supporting Academic Integrity. But as with so many opportunities for enhancement within institutions, initiatives require senior management support, without which change is much less likely to occur or be long-lasting. The rhetoric for the past 2 years from UK governments has been the student at the heart of the system. However, the introduction of new regulation, greater prominence given to league tables, the introduction of the key information sets and the ongoing obsession with research excellence does place institutions under much greater scrutiny than ever before. We need to continue to act as ambassadors for academic integrity across the sector to ensure it remains centre stage. This conference is a great opportunity for the exchange of knowledge and to explore further the challenges facing institutions and students now and in the future. The programme and the list of topics which I've reviewed looks fantastically engaging, and I wish you very well over the next 2 days. Thank you.